So next up, we have 4 lightning talks. So these are going to be 5-minute talks. We're keeping them to 5 minutes. And I've been told that when 5 minutes is over, I'm supposed to stand up and encourage you all to start clapping so that our poor, unfortunate speaker is herded off the stage. I'm kind of short, so I'll probably stand up and kind of wave my arms around a little bit. So please help me get people off the stage. So first up, we have Naomi Shiffman from Mozilla, who's going to talk to us about Warrants Are the New Black, Location Data, and the Fourth Amendment. Naomi.
Thank you. I think this is working. Thank you. Hello. I'm a former policy researcher at Mozilla. I just finished my Master's of Public Policy at UC Berkeley, data protection enthusiast, and my research was on location data in the fallout of the Carpenter versus the US Supreme Court decision of June 2018. So just a short recap for those of you who may not be aware, Carpenter was a Supreme Court decision that essentially stated that warrants are necessary to seize cell site location information in criminal procedure. So CSLI, cell site location information, is data that your cell phone sends to towers automatically, just when it's checking in to make sure that the tower is still there, right, if the signal is still working. And before this case, that was considered not protected under the Fourth Amendment. And after Carpenter, that kind of data is. And so the question is, what other kind of location data can be considered protected under the Fourth Amendment? So what kind of location data did we talk about in this study? So we're looking at web browser location data. So that's not just IP addresses, but it's specifically precise location data. So your browser will ask you if you want to share your location data with a certain website. If you say yes, that website is identifying your precise location data through a combination of means, triangulating between Wi-Fi routers, GPS, and they can keep this location data indefinitely. We don't have a data protection law in this country. And sometimes this is collected for core service provision, sometimes it's not. But if you select remember this setting after you've granted access, that website can collect your location data every time you log on to that site without asking again. So the setup for this study is that we ran a survey and we showed users this pop-up. So on Firefox, this is what the location request looks like. And we ran a survey through Heartbeat, which is Firefox's survey tool, for 2 weeks. We had a sample size of a little over 6,600. We only sampled within the United States, and users just got like a small drop-down bar at the top of their browser asking if they wanted to participate in a survey. And we also gathered telemetry data about the location prompts. So we targeted this survey at folks, 10% of all users who had recently seen a location data prompt and agreed to have their data shared, 10% who had not agreed, and then 0.5% who had not even received the prompt, just to round out our sample. And we asked them 8 questions focused on criminal procedure and consumer privacy. And here is what we found. So 93% of all users believe that police should need permission from a court to obtain location data of this specific kind. 63% believe that websites should notify users when they've shared location data with law enforcement. And 72% believe that websites should delete location data immediately. So that actually was right when the users navigated away from the page, not just when they closed the browser window or quit the browser application. We also asked questions that compared location data to other types of data that are more stringently protected in the United States. So we asked about willingness to share location versus financial data, and we gave examples. Financial data was like bank transaction records, not just your credit card number, which everyone throws around the internet. So we saw about an equal split. People were about equally divided between seeing location data as more or less or equally sensitive. And we had a similar split with location and medical data. And the medical data example was like your heartbeat in your fitness tracker, for example. So what does it all mean? Location data is sensitive. People see it as they're about split on whether they see it equally sensitive to financial and medical data, and they want it gone immediately, right? Users think that websites should delete this immediately once they leave the page. And then also, users think law enforcement should require permission from a judge to access location data, so they see it as sensitive and think that it should be protected. So questions for future research. We're curious about how soon companies should notify users of law enforcement requests, how much data companies should be able to share with law enforcement when law enforcement has requested it. And we're also wondering whether users feel if location data privacy depends on whom they're sharing that location data with. Thank you very much.
One on as well?
Can I find it here? Oh, there it is. Present mode somewhere there.
Okay, so next up we have Jim Fenton from Altmode Networks to talk through a privacy and security-focused notification system.
Thanks. I'm Jim Fenton. I'm actually an independent consultant. And what I want to talk about is a side project that I've had going on for a while on dealing with notifications, which I think are existing mechanisms, which are primarily email and SMS and things like that, do not handle in an appropriate way, especially with respect to privacy and to some extent security as well. To start with, I need to set some context by what I mean by notification. So I've got a bunch of examples up here. I hope some of you can see them. They range everywhere from, there's a tornado warning there somewhere, I think, all the way down to free gift card at LL Bean, or the sort of the free latte at your coffee shop is the common example that I give. The idea is there's a whole range of things that we get notifications about, and they have radically different urgencies. Some of these you want to you really want to know about right away, and some of these are like, okay, well that's nice. Next time I'm going past the coffee shop, I'll deal with that. So the problems that we have with this right now, actually we tend to focus on the ones that we have as people getting notifications, but the notifiers have a lot of problems as well. For us, the big privacy problem is that if we want to get a notification about something, we have to give out our phone number, our cell phone number typically, or email address or something like that, and that tends to inhibit people from signing up for things that they might otherwise be interested in if they don't know something about the notifier. We also get a lot of clutter. We get messages about things that have already happened, or sales that have already finished, or tornado warnings that have already expired. And it would be nice if the system would clean those up for us. There's a certain amount of spam that we get. We're not always sure that the notification is really from who we think it is. But on the notifier side, I mean, suppose you're a marketing person. You would like to know that the people that you're sending these notifications to actually got them. If, I get maybe 3 notices from my dentist's office every time I have an appointment. They want to make sure that I know to come. So they send me an SMS and a text message and an email, all because that optimizes for them the possibility that I will actually get one of those. I'd rather not get all 3. Notifications also change. I mean, using the tornado example, you could have a tornado watch that becomes a tornado warning. Well, you don't need the tornado watch notification. You need the warning now. Or the threat goes away, and you want to be able to delete these things. All of the messaging things that we have right now tend to be send a message, and if you need to update it, you need to send another message, more clutter. There's also no way to indicate the urgency in most of our messaging systems. It would be nice to know that the tornado warning is something that I really needed to be warned about. So I have been thinking about an approach to this and doing some work on approach to this, where there's basically a user-chosen agent. You can think of it as being sort of like an email server, but it's not an email server that sits in the middle, and it represents you as the user, not the notifier. So notifiers can send notifications to this agent using a REST API. So it's a single hop sort of thing. The notifier gets immediate feedback if the notification isn't accepted. They also use a unique address that represents not the recipient, but the relationship that the recipient has with the notifier. And then the notification agent has rules in it that allow you to allow the user to specify how they'd like to how they'd like the agent to respond. Do they want to get an SMS? Do they want to get some sort of a push notification, or can they just read it when they get around to it? So this has been a side project for a few years now. I've got some prototypes that are actually up on GitHub if anybody is interested in playing with them. I keep tweaking this. I've been working on an IMAP interface because you might want to scan the notifications using your friendly email agent. And I've been working on some interfaces to other things that might generate notifications, like Twitter, although Twitter keeps changing its APIs on me. So there's some more information at a URL that's there, and if anybody is interested in this stuff, I would be happy to hear from you. So thank you very much.
Okay, so next up we have Jim Lane from Virtru, who's going to talk about growing a UX team in a privacy and security organization.
All right, let's see. That's right. Yep. And now for something completely different. About a year ago, I was presented an unusual opportunity to join a data protection and privacy organization in DC and bootstrap UX from the ground up. No team, no process. And this was an interesting opportunity. And I wanted to share some of the strategies I've employed. I've led teams for about 20 years. And share some of the strategies for growing UX and research in your organizations. So, as everybody here knows, usability is a big problem. For instance, only 43% of organizations employ encryption across the enterprise. One of the reasons why is that they're just too hard to use. And without usability, you don't have adoption. Without adoption, the best security solutions fail. So I had my work cut out for me. I needed to put some basic building blocks in place really quickly, and particularly in a startup setting. One of the first questions was, what's the strategic importance of UX and research in the organization? And new teams oftentimes struggle with this. Is there executive buy-in? And how do I get it? And one of the things I recommend for new teams and new leaders is talk to leadership about what the strategic business priorities are in the organization, and then how will you measure UX, how will you measure research, and then tie those metrics back to the business goals of the company. It's a great way to start the conversation. And then map the team's goals to those objectives. Speaking of which, I needed a team, because there wasn't one. So UX is a really broad field. There's a lot of disciplines. Some people are specialists, like information architects, user researchers. Some people are generalists who do a lot of different things. Now, Virtru had 4 kinds of products, generally speaking. And so what I did was hired 4 relatively senior product designers who could then align with each of those groups of products. Your mileage may vary, but when you're looking to hire designers and researchers, particularly designers, look beyond portfolio. Think about process. How do they work? And look for soft skills like communication, collaboration, Agility, these are things that are much harder to teach than a particular design tool, particular research tool. And then process. So how to weave design and research into an agile product development process. Now there's whole meetups and events about this. But what we did was each of those designers is aligned with a product manager and an engineering manager to make sure that prototyping and research is tied in every step of the product development lifecycle, and that we're measuring every step of the way. So we have the data science to back up the design and research conclusions we arrive at. One of the recommendations I make to a new team is figure out how to demonstrate value quickly. So for instance, when the team first started, the first thing we did was heuristic evaluations of every one of the products. That way we could determine, okay, based on best practices, what are the most important things that we need to address first while we get our legs under us? So it's a quick way to get started. And then think about tools. Virtru has multiple kinds of products, web applications, browser extensions, mobile applications. And so we knew we needed to scale design really quickly. So we invested pretty heavily in the first year in a design system we called Virtuoso, built on Sketch and Abstract and Storybook. We also needed to take into account compliance and localization, accessibility, mobile form factors. The design system helped us do that a lot more quickly and with confidence. But whatever tools your team puts together, think about scale and speed, and particularly how are designers and developers and researchers going to collaborate and hand off resources, assets, and styles and such. And then finally, strategy. How are we going to design? Virtru defines usable encryption very specifically as protection that is persistent, that it requires no previous relationship, no exchanging of keys. There is control and visibility into how data is protected. So how to create usable experiences that really promote and support this. I like to use a model with a new team of just a really basic modified Maslow pyramid of needs, starting first with how will we demonstrate empirically with testing that our customers can actually use the product? That's baseline, have to start with that. Then thinking about triggers, which we heard about yesterday, of how do we notify, when do we warn, when do we block, what does that look like? When are the right times to step in? And then as the customers grow in complexity, how do we scale the experience with their sophistication? And then ultimately arrive at product experiences that are unlocking collaboration, unlocking the power of data, and then that are easy to use but also powerful. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you.
Thank you. So for our last talk of the session, we've got Isha from Rutgers University who's going to talk to us about social interventions to reduce the privacy paradox.
Good afternoon, everybody. I know I'm the last lightning talk of the session, and hopefully we'll get our coffee and snacks soon. Okay, is this better? Okay, great. So my name is Isha Ghosh. I am a doctoral candidate from Rutgers, New Jersey, and I'm here to talk about my proposal, which is the use of social interventions to reduce the privacy paradox. So basically, what I'm doing is exploring the contradictory relationship that exists between privacy attitudes and behaviors. As other people in this talk have said, or in these sessions have talked about, a large number of people say that they are highly concerned about privacy. They are worried about how their data is being used by third parties, by government agencies, by websites. But we don't see a similar behavior demonstrated by these people when it comes to protecting their data or not sharing their data. Some of these have been discussed in previous talks about the use of password managers or two-factor authentications or other forms of protecting the data. It could simply be a lack of awareness. There's a large amount of research on why people don't don't take these steps. But this gap or this inconsistency between attitudes and behaviors has basically been called the privacy paradox in research literature. As I mentioned, there has been a large amount of research that talks about this gap and why it exists, but there hasn't been similar research in how we can use interventions, specifically social interventions, in reducing this gap between attitudes and behaviors. There has been work on shifting attitudes or shifting behaviors, but there hasn't been enough work on how we can reduce this misalignment between attitudes and behaviors, which is where my proposal comes in, where I intend to use social influence-based interventions to solve this misalignment or correct this misalignment. Previous work has used insecurity and privacy, has used social interventions. Work by Das et al. Has used social proof to encourage the adoption of privacy or security settings. We've seen similar work in the case of privacy policies and reducing uncertainty about privacy policies. What I propose is a 15-day between subject interventional study where we first measure privacy attitudes through an online survey. We use a scale to measure user privacy attitudes. We then invite participants into a lab and ask them to perform a set of disclosure tasks, typically tied into the scale. So in the scale, if we ask them how comfortable they are with sharing their location data or medical data, we would ask them to perform a task that gets them to share exactly the data that we ask them for in the scale. We then give them 3 different types of interventions. We divide participants into 3 groups. Each of these interventions is based on a separate concept. So we have social proof-based interventions, which is the use of social influence. We then have an information inconsistency intervention, which is simply telling people that your attitudes and behaviors don't match. And then we have a control group or a baseline intervention. So the big research question here is to study if social proof is a more effective way to reduce the misalignment between attitudes and behaviors. We then have an after intervention session where we measure privacy attitudes online. In lab session 2, we invite participants back to the lab and we ask them to perform similar activities that they did in the first step. So we don't ask them to disclose the same data or perform the same tasks. We ask them to perform similar tasks. For instance, in study 1, if we ask them to share pictures from their Facebook account, in the after session, we would ask them to share a video from their Snapchat account. So tasks that are similar but not exactly the same. This is a sample of the 3 interventions that we plan to use. As you see, all 3 of them have basically the same message, but the difference is that in the first intervention, we focus on the fact that they are doing something that a majority of the population is not doing. Here, the idea is that people consider something that the majority is doing as a good or a right behavior. So if we tell them that your behavior is unlike what the majority of the population is doing, we might see some changes. In the second group, we simply tell people that their attitudes and behaviors do not match. And in the third, we just give them basic information about their behavior without giving them any further prompts. Now, very quickly, because I'm out of time, the reason that this study is important or that we are thinking about this study is because this gap between attitudes and behaviors has existed for a long time. Reducing this gap or helping people better understand why their attitudes and behaviors don't match and how they can match it would help them feel more in control of their data and feel better about sharing information. So with that, thank you. And